Hey, what's up? Listen, I have to say this. Okay, it's in my DNA to say this. It's in my grandparents that came poor on both sides of my family from Italy to work in the United States. And the only reason they allowed them in is because they needed builders in the late 1800s and early 1900s, and they needed people to fight their freaking wars, right? So they created this Ellis Island, right? This way to bring people, poor people, in from other countries to make them legally citizens here, right? Legally residents, right? And do the work for them, right? And now this the and whoever knows me knows I hate politics, right? So this isn't an attack on any side of politics, okay? But the assholes in Washington want us to believe that it's the poor immigrant that's the whole problem. The poor immigrant that's trying to come in because he has really no legal way to come in because it takes money now to come in, right? So they want us to believe that he's our problem, right? Like our grandparents. That poor person's our problem. Well, let me give you a freaking education, okay? It's not the poor immigrant that's our problem. And I'm gonna talk about Koreans, and this has nothing to do about the Korean person, okay? I'm talking about economics, okay? The assholes in Washington, while they have you all fighting each other, thinking it's the poor immigrant that's our problem, allowed these multi-millionaires, if not billionaires, move their money into New York in the early 90s because the Koreans in South Korea were so afraid that the idiot, the lunatic in North Korea was going to take their money. So the extremely rich South Koreans moved their money into Flushing. And if a house back then was going for $100,000, they had $200,000 in a paper bag in cash and offered that and paid $200,000 more than what the bank appraised the house for. My mother's house was one of them. Okay? Then what happened is they kept moving more and more and more money in, and they bought up all of Flushing. They're in Staten Island. They tried to go in Brooklyn. They had some problems in Brooklyn, but they're all over now, and they're moving out of the states of New York, okay? So you say to yourself, well, okay, so what? Yeah, not so what. Let me explain to you why it's not so what, okay? What happens is that we went to New York and spoke to the owner who's living in my mother's home, and they paid $700,000. They're the second owner from my mom, and they paid $700,000 for the house, a $100,000 shit little home. They paid $700,000, but not them. The people who are sending the money in from, like the guy who bought my old landlord's house in Bayside. I never met the guy who bought the house. It was somebody that was hired to live there and take care of the house. And then they gave me a letter that I have like a month to move out, which I took like 6 months to move out and not paying any rent. But it's not the rich person coming in. They're just moving their money. So again, you say, well, how does that hurt us? Okay, well, let me explain. Everybody's complaining about how high the rent is, right? Well, if you buy a $100,000 home for $700,000, then $1.2 million as an investment property, you have to charge $4,000 a month rent, maybe $5,000, right? You have to pay, you have to charge this crazy rent. So while these morons that you all fight for in Washington are, I want to say the F word, but I'm going to try and keep it clean, because while we're fighting and then looking at the poor immigrant that comes in and making all fun of what DeSantis did and, you know, what he did to me was, what if that was my freaking grandparents that he did that to? And again, I'm not politics, all right? But I want to stay on the economic side. Okay? So how the hell is our grandkids gonna come out of college and afford $4,000 and $5,000 a month rent because the assholes running our country in Washington allowed a whole fucking country to come in with millions and billions of dollars and buy up cities, buy up towns. And then because they paid so much money, the rent is going up. And then you know what us Americans do, right? We say, well, if this guy is going to charge $3,000 a month rent, why can't I charge $3,000 a month rent? It's like basic economics that we failed at. You're never supposed to allow filthy rich immigrants to come in with that type of money. When I went to Ecuador on vacation, the guy stopped me after I passed U.S. Customs, and he called me over and he wanted to see how much money I was bringing into Ecuador. You know why? Because they don't want to disrupt their economics. I was in a suit jacket, I was going to meet a friend that I worked with in New York for 10 years. And he stopped me because I was dressed more like business casual. And he wanted to see. He didn't ask me. I had to open my bag and I had to open my wallet. And he wanted to make sure that some foreigner wasn't going to come into Ecuador and turn upside down the whole economy with 3,000 other people or 10,000 other people like me or 50,000 other people like me. So, we're so fucking stupid. We're so focused on that poor immigrant that's just trying to come in to eat and make a better life and work. And we allowed, which we don't even know if it's freaking North Korea buying the homes in New York and other places. What if it's North Korea buying the houses? What if it's North Korea that had a plan to disrupt our whole freaking economics and economy? So please stop buying into these stupid people in Washington and fighting each other over it. It's not the poor person like our grandparents that's going to screw up the country. It's the rich, filthy billionaires that bought up a whole freaking city. Open your eyes. Open your eyes. How could a $100,000 shit house like the one I grew up with be $1.2 million now? Come on, that's not inflation. That's because people came with money, cash in the bags. I remember in 1990s, early, like 1990, everybody was saying, wow, these guys are walking around with $300,000 cash in a brown a supermarket bag. And my old landlord, he came to me because I was going to buy his house and I would have stayed in New York in Bayside. And he said, Vito, I know I would sell you the house for, $200,000, but when I was ready to move to Florida, but this guy's offering me $200,000 more than what the bank appraises it. And I told him, nah, listen, I understand, but I didn't know but I didn't realize what was happening. How can our government allow such a thing to throw off our whole housing economics and our whole housing? Ask yourself, how is all you, my family, my friends who have grandkids that are 3 years old like me and 1 year old, how are they going to pay the rent when they come out of college? Because we allowed a country, right, that was afraid of this maniac in North Korea to move all their money. And my father was a blue-collar worker. And my father was a genius because before my father died in 1992, he said it. He said that what's happening is they're moving the money in because they don't want to lose it. But then here's a twist. Who's to say it's not North Korea buying all the houses for $1.2 million? Because I tell you what, the people that I knew that bought the house, they weren't the owners, okay? They just moved here. The owner who owned that home was still in Korea. We got to take our heads out of our asses, okay? We got to take our heads out of our asses. Stop thinking that it's the poor immigrant that's going to fuck our country up. What's fucking up our country is our country, Washington, all sides. I still don't know how anybody could pick a side. Let a country of millionaires and billionaires move their money into our system, then eventually keep buying it and raising the price, and then rent has to go up. It's a disgrace. It's a disgrace what everybody, how little-minded people can be and believe the bullshit. It's not the poor immigrant that has no way to come in legally, because to come in legally, you need money now. They don't need them to fight a war anymore like they needed my freaking family. They don't need anybody to come in and bust their ass to build bridges like my grandfather did, right? They don't need that anymore. We don't even want to pick up a fucking pencil anymore, right? So, we got to take our heads out of our asses.